at some extent better rules. You happy with this or want to add something? Anything needs to be added? And also, if you have rules, then actually only a violation to a rule is a defect. Right? Because if you play a game, you play a soccer game, like for instance, there are rules in soccer game. And only when a rule is violated, the referee will blow his whistle and say, wrong. He cannot just say, that's wrong. Why is it wrong? I don't know, but it's wrong. And now you're laughing. This is what testers often do, right? They say, oh, this is wrong. Why is it wrong? I don't know, but it's wrong. Come on. You have to be specific. So one of the things I've learned in requirement engineering is what we need is a set of rules we all understand. And the rules will be different per project, per organization, per context. Although there will be some common rules as well. And this is your first goal, your first set of rules. Okay? You can stay in the groups. And based on your rules, you can turn the page. Hopefully I think you can turn the page. Yeah. And then we have a requirement specification. So using your rules, using the rules you've just defined as a group, because you said, wait for reading. You can read in a minute, okay? Everyone's on, wait for reading. You said, only when these violations take place, you are happy. That's what you said to me just now. So when you start reviewing this document as a team, look for if everything is in scope. Is it simple, not complex? Is it non-redundant? Look for the violation to these rules. And if you find something else, this is actually wrong. Ooh, you're missing a rule. Okay? You may write that down and then later on say, we've missed a new rule, please. Okay, let's spend some time reviewing the document. Find some defects based on these rules, and perhaps you may find some rules are missing, please, in the team. And communicate and discuss the defects together, right? That's the idea. Talk. No page turning. No page turning. Yeah. This is the one.
What exactly do you want? And raise the profit company, this is not the standard. Profit is very also, I don't think it's the company within because the testing is so important. For example, you must raise the profit within 6 months. There's no way we can test this in a month. We can't test this. No way to test it. Not test it. A lot of
Yeah, sometimes it's good to say it's good. It's also possible.
Like say
if you are finding defects that do not relate to a rule already defined, you are allowed to propose a new rule in a minute. You may find a defect and say, that's not a rule, but then we need to know, that's okay. We're learning. Requirements? Good. You, your name is Steffi, says, actually, I have an example of this rule. Actually, what I mean by unambiguous, in case of a format, please specify the format. You see what's happening? This is very good because now we are making this rule more tangible. Because next time someone sees a format, suppose we in your environment agree on this rule. And the next time there's a format someone, you can say as a tester, please, you should specify the format. That's a rule we have. And it will probably make you happy as a tester, Steffi, but also people at the back who are developers would say, I now understand exactly in which format it needs to be programmed. Correct? It's a good rule, good addition. Any more additions to these rules? We're all happy now. That's okay, I'm just asking. Yeah? Okay. I also did a quick review, by the way, on this spec. I'm not sure you have the same comments as I do, probably not. Let me just see what I got. On top, the first sentence. Oh, sorry, I think you're blocking. The first sentence is probably more a business objective than a requirement. It's a very different sentence, the first sentence. Can you pick it up? In the requirements document, there's two levels of requirements. So the first one is a business objective. I am missing in the whole document IDs, which was a rule we had. So it's going to be very hard to establish traceability to test cases without IDs. Right? So IDs are missing. I also saw, and there was a rule we had, consistency, wasn't it? Somewhere?
Yes.
Consistent. Yes, because I saw radio watch and watch. Yeah. Is it the same thing?
No.
I don't know. Please be consistent. Comment I make. I had several questions about these ones. These are at least ambiguous. Indeed, you said compound. Who said compound? You? Yeah. There's an and here, there's an or there, there's, wow. Interesting ones. By the way, I also have like, people don't like to wait, oh, the new watch shall be waked up streaming. What is this? Is there a requirement? Is it just a text? Or I have no idea. So it's a vague thing and no requirement. It may be that it intends to be something like an example. I don't know. Talking about consistency, by the way, and language, nobody commented on that. But in this thing, I have shall, there is will, there is must, there is can. How much more confusion do you want? Maybe in the unambiguous one, I'm just adding something here. We should have also another example. Use shall unless options, then we use can. That could be a rule. It makes it clear, eh? If we use shall all the time, because now so it's must something different than shall, and will something, I don't know. So we are building our rules, eh? Very quickly. Here we have a rationale, which is allowed, but probably it's not, the rationale is more or less mixed with the requirement. That's very confusing. Hey, and one thing you didn't say, there's not a rule for that in your case. Iron parts, designs. There are many design issues here, which are already in the requirements. There's solutions actually already in the requirements. Again, vague, not testable. A heavy knock. What's a heavy knock? I have no idea. By the way, what's easy to use? And again, type 3434 as design and solution. What is made? Okay. You probably came up with the same comments as well. We're building a rule set for better requirements. Already doing it. Let's look at, you can sit down and watch me a little bit now. Let's look at what are good requirements, and now I will give you some, at least examples of that. What I would like you to be able to do after attending this half day is go back to your company, to your project, and start talking in your project about we probably need a set of rules for requirements. That to me is one of the most important messages. Because in my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, 99% of the projects have no rules for requirements. So what we're doing is we are trying, don't get me wrong, trying is good. We are trying, we're having discussions all the time about the requirements, and discussions are endless, and the next project again, we have the same discussions again, and are endless again. And the requirements engineers are annoyed by that, and the business analysts, and the testers, and the developers. So one of the first steps to take, if you want to get moving, is to say, okay, let's sit down and let's refine. It's only a step-by-step process. Clear rules for our requirements. And you are already very knowledgeable because you helped me to say, and here were already a set of simple rules. And what you saw when we started using it, we even say, okay, so what you're missing. Non-compound was missing. Language was missing. Steffi said, hang on, I know unambiguous is a rule, but probably we need to elaborate on that. Be more specific. That's good, by the way, more specific. So, in case of formats, please specify the formats. In case we're using words like shall, will, must, whatever, use the word shall, and only where there are options we use can. So this simple rule is already being more detailed. This is very, very important. And if someone asks you, as a tester, what do you want? You want clear rules. For instance, non-compound. You stated that. I think it's always a discussion. Because if you don't allow compound requirements, you get many more requirements. That's always a discussion in the company. I, to some extent, don't care what you choose, but choose. Either we say we are allowed compound requirements, which has its consequences, or we say we do not allow compound requirements, which is also good. But in any case, it's clear. So later on when you're reviewing, it's clear that you either can say non-compounds allowed or not allowed. And the same with English. It is such an obvious statement. But please make clear whether you have in UK or US English. I've been in so many projects where that was a discussion in every project again. Come on! We don't want to waste professional time by having discussions like this. So one of the things we're trying to teach you is to make a rule set. Or at least have a discussion back home and say, I've learned something, I've got ideas, how to make a rule set for class. Please. No, it's part of it. You could easily say, because your question is, am I correct, is can this rule set also be used as sort of entry criterion for testing? I could say, as a tester, it could be an entry criterion. I will start my if you want to work this way, I will start my test design if there are requirements that conform to the rules. That could be your accuracy. Yeah. And you're reusing, in a sense, the same rule set, but using it as your entry criteria. That means when you are participating in a review and doing a testability review on the requirements, you could take the same rule set and say, can we find defects? And it also means, again, you can only a rule defines a defect, a rule violation. You cannot say, I don't like this. What, I don't like this? The rule must be there. I don't like this, it's not a defect. That's your opinion. And it gets more objective. And of course, if you have rules, what will happen to the business analysts? They start understanding these rules as well. Say, okay, now I can write better requirements. Because my goal is not to find defects. My goal is to get better requirements to use them. Yeah? You see what I'm trying to get at? And of course we will make better rules and more better rules. We still have a few hours to go, but the idea is already there, hopefully. Yeah? Okay, let's look at requirements. What do we need? The first thing I always say is that typically quite often people start by writing requirements. A lot of requirements. Only at a very detailed level. The first part of my presentation now will be, let's try, and it's also will be a rule or entry criteria, let us please try to structure. And the structure starts by, we need some kind of a high level, I always call this, we need a business requirement. I call that. Or business case if you want. Or a vision document if you want. Or whatever. It's more like a one-page description is, what's the problem you're trying to address? What are the goals of the project? So that later on there is I think the rule for you is it within scope? You can only check in the scope if there's a higher level document that defines the scope. Right? So we need this one page business case, set of business requirements saying this is the higher level. And later on we'll get the details. So for instance, I'm from Holland originally, so Amsterdam, for Amsterdam I guess. They got a metro station there, just like here in KL. New system, purpose, to sell metro stations more efficiently and faster than currently. The rationale, so why do we need it? Business value, if you want. To increase sales and reduce queuing while buying metro tickets. To make it more concrete, we also have acceptance criteria, which we'll talk a little more later. The product will be hand out tickets 30% faster than the current system. But always when you have performance criteria, you need to have defined circumstances. This improvement shall be achieved on all priority 1 stations at peak hours. That's a high level business case, this is what we're trying to achieve. And of course, if we have business requirements, not all of these things have to be applicable to business requirements. That's a different level of requirements. But it helps. There is a first statement would be, we shall have a business requirement, a business case, a high level document. Otherwise, what will happen in projects, and you've been there, I think, in the beginning the project is like this. And gradually we divert and we end up here, and I said, people say, oh, we don't want that. A clear scope. The second thing is structuring. So one is, we need business requirements, the higher level requirements. Could be business case, whatever you call it. Any word is good for me, I don't care. The second thing is, we need to structure all these individual requirements. Because often what I see is there are many requirements flying around, but there's no structure anymore. How do they group together? A typical way of grouping is using use cases. Okay? Use cases are not the product shall be able to, but they are a high-level description of what will the users do with our system. Correct? Within the scope of this business. And someone said already, I think earlier, I think it's yours, we already have the list of users, remember? Because of the kickoff, we made a list of users. So now, based on this, we are per user going to find a use case. And a use case has a number of steps. And in this requirements field, we feel a use case should be a maximum of 6 or 7 steps. If it's too many steps, too detailed. So business requirements, per user, and use cases. We'll see in a minute how that works out. A use case is a very simple, high-level description again. And now, there's another color. Are you for what? And now, each of these individual requirements, we can map them. Hey, this belongs to this use case. This belongs over here. This fits over here. This fits over here. And here we have 3, and here you have 1, and here we have... Now we get a structure in your requirements. What you don't want is many individual requirements flying around and nobody knows what they are. So use cases are a way to structure your requirements. For those who are working in the agile environment, do you work with user stories? Epics? So epics is like the same thing. It's structuring, if you want, the user stories. Okay. So use cases, epics do the same, and if you want, structuring. Yeah. So what you want is not having all these individual cards, because people tend to have a brainstorm session and we got all these requirements, cards. We want them to be structured. So we have business requirements on the highest level. We either use use cases or in the agile environments tend to use epics, but I don't care which one you use, as long as it does the job. I'm not one of these says, oh, is this agile, so we use epics. Why? If use cases are good, use use cases. Whatever you feel makes it do the job. And then, below that we have individual requirements for individual user stories. As an example, we go back to the metro. We have a use case which is called buying a ticket. So the user or the actor is called the traveler. And the use case in this case has 4 or 5 steps, sorry. Apparently the traveler offers destination, type of ticket, and payment to the product. By the way, the use case, this is okay, yeah? It's still an and is okay. This is not a requirement. The product checks whether the payment is okay for the chosen destination and type of ticket. Okay. The product checks whether the network is operational for the chosen destination, and the product submits ticket and if necessary change. And 5, the product stores the transaction. Now suppose you have a use case. Think of this number of steps. Per step, it's very easy to say, okay, now we have this step, let's think of individual detailed requirements that we need for this step, or to structure. So for instance, use case step 2, the product checks whether the payment is okay for the chosen destination. Aha! So the product shall establish that the payment consists of legal valid money, apparently. The product shall calculate the lowest fare for destination considering day of week and time. Okay? And the product shall compare the chosen payment with the calculated payment. Okay? Shall and go on. So it helps to structure. Okay? First of all, I would like to say to you, if you want to talk about requirements engineering, find a way how your requirements should be structured. It helps, first of all, for overview, but also helps to identify missing requirements. Suppose we have this requirements engineering here, use cases, and this last one is not here. So we have a use case step with no requirements. Not possible, of course, because then there's nothing happening. So it helps to structure, it helps to identify, and helps to identify missing use cases. Sorry, missing requirements. And this, for you then, user stories, same things, epics, and detailing it. It's actually the same thing, but yeah. The second thing I want to talk about here, and I'm giving you all kinds of options. I'm not saying this is the way it should be done. Remember, I said this this afternoon already, is requirements engineering, requirements setup is context dependent. But these are things to consider and talk about, discuss. I have here for you a requirements card. By the way, we will use these cards later on in the exercise. And these are all kinds of attributes that maybe you want to use in your project. But think very carefully which ones you want to use. In this course, it's like, oh, this is great, oh, this is great, wow, this is a good one, this is a good one. And I say yes. But the next thing is, in your project, you've got to do it. If you say this must be filled, it must be fulfilled. It's like, you probably all have defect management systems. And sometimes you have these systems where you want to put in a defect, and they have, 30 different fields you have to fill in. You've been there? And then you think, why do we have all these fields? What's the added value? So the same for requirements. It's good to have additional information, but carefully think, is this information valuable to have in our context, in our project? Let's look at this card. What's on there? Requirements number. I think it's a very important one. If you don't have a number, how can you do traceability? How can you trace requirements back to test cases? And vice versa. How can you trace a requirement to a software design? It's not possible. So requirements should have a unique ID. One of the things which I thought was missing in the spec you just gave. I like, it's not in this rule, so you don't care, I care. I would like to see that for requirements, we document the type. Is it a functional requirement? Is it a non-functional? If yes, with type of non-functional, is it a constraint? Suppose you're a developer. I'm looking at developers now all of a sudden. And you're developing, and some of you have got to look at performance. Wouldn't it be great that you could say, I will go to the Excel database, to the current database, give me, please, all the performance requirements. You can only do that if you have a label requirements type in there. Priority. It helps, I think. They're all important, that's why they're there, but which one is highest priority, highest business value if you want? Sometimes people will put in use case or epic. Suppose you want to say, I want to have all the requirements that belong to use case 3, step 4. Boom, you want all of them. It helps. Description, that's a sentence, yeah, okay. As the product shall be able to, or whatever. Sometimes people add rationale, and rationale is the reason why we have this requirement. What's the business value, someone said here earlier on. Having a rationale, people say, make sure we have what they call gold plating. We have all kinds of nice ideas. It looks nicer, no added value. Rationale. Source. I think, again, doesn't mean you think, I think source, so I mentioned with you, is a very valuable one. Suppose you have a brainstorm session. If you have been in a advanced brainstorm session, people start writing ideas down and they have cards and even in an hour later, someone says, oh, this should come, that's an interesting one, but who made it up? An hour later. And quite often people say, I don't know. So if you don't know, because what you want, suppose you are a tester, and you are testing a business requirement, a set of business requirements. Wouldn't it be nice to say, who made this up, where does it come from? So you can go to the person. Or sometimes there is a change request from a customer, or which is based on. And your document is based on this change request. It has value to know that. Again, I'm not saying you have to do it, these are options. But if you say we'll do it, then you do it. That's the rule you make. Rules are not optional. Rules are mandatory, and we're going to do this. What you see more and more happening, and I'm a big fan of this, is acceptance criteria. It's very hard, I have learned, to write requirements unambiguously. It's almost impossible. However, what you can also do is say, okay, what we can do is have a special field, acceptance criteria, where you can specify some more details, and together it becomes unambiguous. For instance, your example format, I think you could have a description, very clearly, description 24 hours, but in its acceptance criteria, it must fulfill the following format. And together, because the requirement is not a sentence, this whole thing is a requirement. It becomes testable and clear. Some people use size on this, and size means number of story points. So how big is the requirement to develop story points, or function points, or it may be an indicator, especially when I want to say, hey, which requirement can we do in the next release? If we all choose the very big ones, probably will fill up very soon. And finally, so Steffi's proposal also, anything we have on this requirement which is nice to know, which is good to have, an example, a screenshot you said, I believe. Whatever, the only thing is make sure that this is documented in such a way it is clear, it's an example, it's not the requirement. Right? Because sometimes you see people doing this, and then is this now the requirement? Should the screenshot be the requirement, or is it just an idea I'm giving? Requirements cards. Let me see if I traceability, type, use case, grouping, description. By the way, the description, remember, we said earlier, I said you go from quantity to quality, remember? Long time ago, at the beginning. So initially, a description can be vague. I'm okay, initially just write ideas. Brainstorm, be quick. And later on, when we start the development, we will make a quality requirement, meaning it must be fulfill all our rules. Rationale, priority, yes. By the way, this morning we talked about risk-based testing, remember? Some people? Remember? Or not? You remember that? This morning we talked about it. Yeah? Okay, you still remember. If there is a priority field here, we can also use it, of course, in testing, because it gives us information about how important is the requirement. So the criteria, source, size, yeah, we got all these, I think. Acceptance criteria, and you will use them in a minute in the exercise, in a minute later on. To make requirements, I will give you examples in a minute. To make requirements measurable or testable. I think it's, as I said already, I think it's almost impossible to write requirements unambiguously. But together with this field, by the way, it's also called, if you start reading about requirements, it's sometimes called fit criteria. It's the same thing. Define boundaries, define consensus. Also for non-functionals, it's very important. Let's give an example. Suppose there's a user story, we saw it already. As a student, I want to be able to buy a parking pass so I can get across school quickly. Okay, that sounds like a requirement. But all kinds of things you want to probably say over it. Well, the student will not receive a parking pass if payment is insufficient. Only a parking pass to the school parking lot if the person is already a student. The student can only buy one parking pass each month. So basically you're elaborating on this requirement. The rule by the way is a maximum of 5 to 8 criteria per requirement. Otherwise probably you are defining new requirements. One could say, but this should be different requirements if you want, but then you end up with 10,000 requirements. See what I'm doing is, you're grouping already. And this can be, at least for me, this can be in much more informal language. The one on top should be formal. Some people, by the way, I don't know if you've heard about it, it's called Gherkin language, that these kind of criteria have to be documented in such a way, given, context, when, then. I'm not against that. But, what is the main purpose of requirements? I think the main purpose of requirements, remember, we started off, is to have a joint language between the business on one side, remember? And let's say the testers and developers on the other side. That was the main purpose. And the more difficult we write down requirements, the more difficult it's going to be for the business to understand the requirements. So every time you add something which is complex, more complex to the business, they misunderstand. So if you start saying, oh, let's use the Gherkin language, which is great. You know who thinks it's great? Developers think that's great, because they like that, because they use it for test automation. Testers sometimes like that, because they think, oh, this is great, now it's very unambiguous. The business is like, what? I have no clue what's out there. So every time you make something more complex, more formal, think, what are you trying to achieve? A common language between business and IT. That's the goal. And if you go too much to IT, the business will actually approve something later on if you're bad luck and don't know what they're saying. Another example of acceptance criteria. As a tutorial attendee, I want to be able to register with, I don't know, Softtech online in this case, not tech, but software online, so I can register quickly and cut down on paperwork. That could be a requirement. And the thing is, testers typically are very good at defining these criteria, because we tend to ask questions. We tend to start saying, okay, but what information needs to be collected? That's a good question. Typically a developer, no offense by the way, when they read this, they start developing. And testers are typically better at taking a step back and say, okay, what information needs to be collected, and can you pay online? And we start asking questions, we're good at that. That's our role. And based on these questions, you can have a conversation with the business and say, I have a question about this one. What do you mean by? You understand? And as a result, we document the answers in acceptance criteria. So together, this is going to be a pretty stable, ambiguous or unambiguous, whatever you, unambiguous, at least something we both understand as we want this. This is what we want. So, to me, a rule could be, I'm not saying it has to be a rule could be, for a requirement, it's optional, because it can never be mandatory, I think, it's optional to use acceptance criteria, to detail it, to make it unambiguous. And probably the rule should be a maximum of X criteria for business requirements.
How about anything that is exceptional to the acceptance?
I like the one. How about anything that is exceptional to the acceptance?
Yeah, because it's very good.
No, I think that's a mistake. Acceptable to the acceptance. That's why I was triggered. But sorry. But please, sorry. I was sorry. No, again, sorry.
Because, okay, give me an example of acceptance criteria. User cannot submit a form without completing. If it is not completing all the mandatory fields, what are the things that need to be done? Should that be written as well? Then how the system will handle it? I mean, from the requirement perspective, sometimes user did ask that kind of.
The question is to me, how deep do you want to be?
Yeah.
I think this is clear enough. If you want to have more, I will put it in the annotation field. No, that's okay. We go back. So we have description. Okay? We have criteria. Okay? By the way, I would love to take a break, but I've been asked to take a break at 4:30, which I think is very late. So that's why we go on to 4:30. So don't blame me, blame Softec. Okay? And probably we'll take a bit earlier, but around 4:30. That was the idea. I don't know why. And just making you aware. Anyway, your good question. So we have description, we have criteria. And together it should be clear what we want. And we cannot do every detail, of course, in the requirement. Because what users sometimes want is they want to have the screen layout defined with the colors and everything. So basically they want the whole system. So where do you stop? Okay? However, there is also the idea from Steffi, right? That we have a field called annotation. So if you want to add more informal ideas, how the process takes place, a screenshot, example, maybe even an important error message you want. Yeah? Annotations. Annotation is still free format, but it helps development to understand what they want.
I think it's good to be specific and put it under validation.
It also helps, and it depends on your environment or your users. Yeah? Okay? So what you're seeing, and this is important, that initially, when we started this tutorial, are we not all taking a break all of a sudden? Or? When I say 4:30, oh, then I can just go. Yeah, okay, anyway. What we said, originally we looked at only the sentence, and now we're learning already is there are a number of fields you want to document. And the question is where it belongs. But you got, yeah? Okay. We were here, I think, yeah. Acceptance criteria, and if you want indeed to have more renders, all mandatory fields. Which are the mandatory fields? Where do you stop with the requirements, right? I think at this stage is good enough. If you want to do that, put it in annotation. This is an idea we've got already. Here's an example screenshot I put together. Took a picture, later. Good luck. I'm going to skip this one. Some more things, writing guidelines in the, well, we already said short and concise, one requirement per sentence, no compound, we said already, I think we discussed. Consistent terminology, know what they call homonyms, one word having two meanings, or two words having the same meaning. Must and can, shall is better, and can only if options, no solution or design. Directive language, no pronouns. You should never use things like they, it, them, because it's confusing. It's a very simple way to look at the requirements and say this is a forbidden word. templates. And by templates I mean, again, I know there are some people say you must use this template or that. I don't care which template. But choose one and be consistent. The first one is more from a user perspective, and the product shall be able to do something. The second one is one you see a lot in the agile world. As a, whatever role you have, I want to do something so I can the business value. It's good. The third one is more from a system perspective. The launcher shall be able to do something. There are all kinds of templates. There are also templates available on the internet for non-functional requirements. But choosing a template makes life so much easier. Choose one, decide one, and adhere to it. If you look at the thing you were reviewing earlier, there was no template used. Every line was written differently. And that happens in real life as well sometimes. Or should I say often. I'm going to do, I'm going to do 3 or 4 slides and then we're going to take a little break. Whatever they say. We are the boss, right? So we talked about rules already, okay? And this is, rules are agreements. They specify the content, the format of our requirements. More objective, less discussion, and of course, also for developers, I mean requirements engineers, very nice to say, if you do this, then I'm happy. And that means I'm happy as a tester, I'm happy as a developer, both. The problem is, I'm very sorry for that, these are always and should be specific for your organization and sometimes even for a project. So I can give you rules. On the next slide, I'll give you more rules. But you have to go back to your company and say, let's sit down and decide which parts we want to implement and use. And my typical statement is, don't go overboard initially. Keep it simple. You can always build more rules later on, because if you make it too big, too simple, too many attributes, it's not going to work. Now in your handout, and some people are already looking at it, on page 5, I have actually put a list of rules to be used. These are, again, examples, okay? Not just examples, because commonly used examples. What you also see, and I think this is very important, I did not just write down the rule tag and say it's specific, I also try to explain what do we mean by. And I have learned you need this. If you only write down, it has to be simple, not complex, we all have a different understanding. So try to write down what do you mean by simple and complex. And even better, if you have examples, like specify the format. Use shall, not write them down as well.